Hello, and you're so welcome to this episode of the Accountants Club podcast. So, today I'm going into a topic that I have been, I suppose, very frustrated with over the last 30 years in practice. And a lot of it I would have assumed was my own doing, and it becomes down to behaviors and it comes down to how you approach things. But it's a topic of why do I struggle, or why do we as accountants struggle with software implementation? And what can we do about it? And that's the real big question. And I've seen a staggering fact: 97% of firms admit that they aren't using their technology to its full potential. In fact, a lot of them say that software has increased their manual work rather than reduce it. Just think, 97% of firms say that implementing software has increased their manual work rather than reduce it, and it doesn't really work. And what can we do about it, or what really lies behind all of this? And it comes from the idea of the accountant, the software provider, the team, and all of that. So I've broken it down into a number of different segments to talk about it, and I've done a bit of work in the background. So I suppose first segment I want to talk about is the broken promise of accounting software. And many of us and people here have went to all the incredible software demonstration awards, wherever they are, big shows. They're big events now, they're massive events, and you will have all the different providers all around the place, all selling their wares as they are, very ethically. Not a thing wrong with the way they're doing it, not a thing wrong with the fact that this is their software and they're putting their best foot forward for you to use their software. Over multiple years, I've been to multiple of these shows, and I always came away really excited, right, with the shows. But the idea of this adoption gap. So when you go there and you sit down and you look up on a stage and there's someone demonstrating their software, or you go to their stand and they're looking at their software, and you get this concept that this piece of software is going to revolutionize my practice. And I think that if I use this, it'll give me, brilliant insights, give me new revenue, help me with underutilization or overutilization of people or team or whatever it is. But then when I bring it back and adopt it within the practice, it doesn't really work. And I'm looking back then and I'm extremely disappointed, because I've been promised something that's supposed to work for me in my practice, and then they're saying it does work and I'm saying it doesn't work, and then I've lost complete trust in the piece of software. I'll bring it back to the practice and the guys in the practice say, this is terrible, this is not working and everything. And that's the first concept. It's the broken promise of, but whose fault is that broken promise? So who's to blame, or who's to take the responsibility for that broken promise? Is it the software vendor, or is it myself, or is it the person? So where does the fault lie within this? And for me, if we break it down and look at, first of all, inside the firm, what are the human and the operational things that block a new software coming in? I suppose the first thing would be when we put in the new software and people using it, there's this fear when you're using something that you're going to break it, or it's going to be, or it's changing something that I've always done this way within the practice. And by putting this in now, it's going to change the way I do it. There's that bit of a fear and that bit of standoffishness. So there's that kind of that emotional blocker, but there's also the culture blocker that, with the worry about AI and automation out there, is this going to change my job, or am I going to lose my job because this is being brought in now, and does this replace me, and all of that side of it. So there's within the firm as well. So the first thing we're looking at is the emotional and cultural stuff. The other big thing within a firm, and when you look at an accountancy firm, and you look at a team of people you have, some of these are sole practitioners, some of these are small accountancy practices. They're not all the big firms that have all these big departments within it that can just bring this in and sweep it through and make it work, and they've all these technologists within it. Like, a lot of us are ordinary accountants who run ordinary practices who get this software to do it. So there's this confidence gap. They might not have the confidence, and the person is there going out and looking at these things, are you like myself, and I come back and I give it to one of my team, and then my team said, oh no, have I got the confidence to put that in? And there's a hesitation there because it feels risky. And the compliance team feel risky. This, is this safe? Can someone break into this, or can someone hack this, or all that side of it? So there is that kind of a confidence gap. And then there's this client pressure. Am I introducing something new to the client? Is the client going to say, oh, last thing you showed me didn't work, or the last thing you showed me is brilliant? So there's that fear of disruption of the relationship with the client by experiencing some new process. So really what you need to understand is that the first place that you look when you buy this piece of software and you get it is yourself inside the firm and inside, can you do anything better within the firm to potentially do that? The next thing is this thing called the vendor and the user disconnection. So integration, they say, I'm just reading a stat here, 38% cite lack of integration as a major efficiency killer. Vendors overselling features and not focusing on real enablement within the practice, and frame this as not bad intent, but a mismatch between what the expectation of what's being bought and sold and the marketing side of it. So there's always this vendor and user disconnect. And with respect to the people selling the software, their job, not totally, but their job in principle is to onboard people onto the practice with ethical guidelines. I'm not saying this is pushy or do nothing like that, but they're enthusiastically promoting the product. And some of the features, you're trying to fit a product into a practice, but you're trying to fit the product to solve problems in the practice that the product is never designed to solve. So there's this user disconnect with the seller, and that's a big, big, big issue. The other big issue, or the other big thing we need to look at, is the human barrier. And this is nothing to do with the tech. This is a human barrier within this. We've always said culture eats strategy. So having the culture of your firm, is it forward thinking? Is the culture enablement? Is the culture AI? Is the culture automation? What kind of a culture do you have in your firm for the likes of, and are you open to this new software stuff? Are you open to growing? Are you open to automation? Or do you just love the concept of it, but you're not really open to it? So understanding the culture within the practice before you bring something into the practice is really important. So having that understanding of what their culture is, that's incredibly powerful and incredibly important. So in terms of the human barrier, training is a big thing. So the gap from you looking at the software, from an expert typing in the software, doing all the great stuff that the software to do, and you sitting with a client or sitting with a team member or sitting with your own team and doing this, and you coming in and they come in, install the software, give you a couple of hours training, then off you go. And then you're going, what does that button mean? Press that button, what happens here? So that training gap is a big, big part of this. So understanding what's the proper level of training and over-engineering something that doesn't need to be over-engineered. So what's the minimum effective dose? So if I do this, I'm going to get this massive return. And then learning by doing is the other big part of that. And then the other side of this is change fatigue. So lack of clarity on why this matters in the practice. And then people just get tired of it. They just get up, no, done, finished. Not putting this software in because it's not going to do what I think it's going to do. And it just sits on the shelf, and that becomes part of the 97% which we talked about at the very start of the podcast. That is really important to understand there, that a lot of this depends upon, so it's like you have your practice architecture. You have all your main pieces of product within the practice. Those pieces of our software within the practice, they're embedded. Some of these are embedded for a long number of years within your practice. So having these embedded in your practice means that it's difficult to change. So you're changing something that's kind of working. Instead of saying, with the software that I currently have, how can I change and use that software better? For instance, we use Futurely within the practice. Now, we have evolved over the years and years using Futurely. And the way we use it has evolved within the culture of our practice, within what we do, within how the software works, within the growth within the software. So understanding that and not being too complicated with it. Because where this software can do multiple group consolidated, 3-4 way forecasts, it's fantastic that it can do that, but it can also do a dashboard that I can see this week versus last week. And when I'm in my own practice first, when I look at it, I say, that's the really important information to me. But then with a client, it's the simplest. Always ends up, what's the simplest thing I can do to have the biggest impact with that piece of software when I do put it into the practice? And what does that mean within the practice? So that's a really, really big part. So what I want to talk about is if the software goes in and when the software works, what can we expect? As practice owners, if we get a really good, massively impactful piece of software that's going to change a lot, and that software, you can see that software there in 10 years' time. That's a big thing. You're buying a piece of software not for today, but will that software be there in 10 years' time? So the firm you're buying it off, with respect, will that firm be there in 10 years' time? If you spend all this time and effort and energy putting it in, will your team be able to use it in 10 years' time? So having a little bit of deep understanding about who's selling it, the likes of Sage, massive firm, around for years. So you're buying a piece of their software, it's going to, they're going to be around. And the likes of Futurely, it has rechanged and it has expanded, but it's been there for a long number of years now, and it's very embedded within there. What we're seeing is using these likes of this, that we're increasing our fees per client because we're providing more service, and we're differentiating the way we do it because we're using the softwares. And like we're seeing up to a 39% increase in revenue per employee by using this. And I'm not talking about the compliance versus advisory model. I'm not talking about, I don't like those concepts, but advisory is something that's here. So advisory first activation. So how do you activate advisory properly within your firm and build it for long term? And that one piece of software has led me to massively shift the practice within it. And it's not that I'm trying to sell future. I'm just talking about my own experiences and how I have put stuff in. And I've put a lot of other software in that didn't work and walked away from it. And I've looked at a lot of real good software and it just doesn't adapt to the type of practice that I have with the multi-jurisdiction and different offices. So that software won't work in there, and it's really good. And I'd love to have it in. So it's understanding that what the software can do, how it can improve your practice, and how it can actually increase the revenue per client. So you need to define your vision. You need to assemble your team. They're really big, but you need to understand what your practice architecture really looks like. And what practice architecture do you have, and what it takes for a piece of software to get into that practice architecture. So if I had to adopt a piece of software to put into my practice, what can it do for my practice? But more importantly, I'm not buying the software just for the software. I'm buying the software because I can work with the software providers. They can help me grow my practice because they're the best users of this piece of software. They can show me the model, work with me on an ongoing basis. And that's the type of software provider that I want. I want a partnership model rather than a software provider. They need to be with me on the journey, or else it's just not going to work. So having that person on the journey, then I need to understand what a quick win is. I need to pilot really quick wins with putting in a piece of software. So if I one thing that software can do, I get it in, show everybody how to use it, let everybody be really excited about it, then show them the next thing. Because over-engineering work means it gets too complicated and you go down this rabbit hole and you're down there for 3 months and next thing you've lost 3 months and it doesn't work. So iterate it, expand it, learn it, move through with it, educate your team on it, make sure your team understands what it can do. Then you'll build this into full activation with across the practice. And when you full activation and it's embedded properly, it's there forever. It's there for your 10-year piece of software. Now you understand what the return on that, when it sits into your practice architecture, what return does that give you? And then does that return, if you get that return, can you really and truly use this to differentiate you in a world that's full of accountants and in a world where business owners expect answers, rightly so, today, not in 3 weeks' time or 4 weeks' time? So how can that piece of software enable me to deliver what I want to do? And this is the new mantra moving forward. But leading by advice, my job is to ask better questions. But I have to ask better questions of myself. And this is one of the areas I've said, when I look at the stack that I have and look at all the softwares I have, they're redundant shelf softwares, I call them. They're just sitting on the shelf. And I'm paying for them but not using them. So therefore, I have to re-engage and reassess the people and the software to see, does it form part of the new journey that we're on moving forward? What needs to change? There's 3 areas that I'm looking at, and I just have some notes. What needs to change for the firms, for the vendors, and for the industry in general? So there has to be a new partnership model. That's the only way this thing's going to work. And what is a new partnership model? So for firms have to commit and invest in training. They have to show leadership within the firm. And that's the big part. This is a serious part of our business. We have to show leadership. And we have to look at this advisory first training and framing and making sure the software can help us on that journey. Software is an enablement to things that you really want to do in your practice. That's for the firms. For the vendors and people who are selling the software, become partners, not software providers. There's no other solution to this. And you see big multinational companies, and I've witnessed this, pushing increased number of pieces of software because they want to increase their software, their number on the market, and they want to buy more licenses. That's done. That's over. That should never have been the case. And brands that were really good at having this connection with the partner have now gone and changed into, there's a corporate culture here. We just need to add more people onto it. And that's out there. And we all know who they are, and we all know what's going on in that journey. And that's not going to last because people won't accept that because they just don't want to have that relationship in the new style of practice that they're driving forward. So for the vendors, become partners, not providers. Offer hands-on guidance and have success managers that help the practice owners move the practice forward. That's a big part of it. So if I'm a success manager, I need to come to an accountant and show him how he's going to grow his firm. 100%. And how he's going to grow his firm using not just this piece of software, but in general grow the firm and then focus in on the thing that they're selling. For the industry, for the institutes and the industry in a long term, celebrate peer learning. Big part of this. Have case studies. Really, case studies, everybody wants to see a case study. And show me the case study how this worked. And then that's the real catalyst for software. If I can see a case study, talk to the person, find out where the problems are and find out an honest review, big part of it. And the other thing is reframe this return on investment metrics. Just reframe it as an industry and let us see what's going to happen. And as we're supposed to finish up, I just wrote a little thing here and I'm just going to read it out to you. This isn't about more features. It's about fewer barriers. I don't want the software to do this extra piece up here. I just want to have no barriers and understand it clearly and plainly. It is about moving beyond adoption to outcomes, where the software isn't just something you pay for, but something that transforms your practice and your client's future. So this is about the practice, but it's also about the client's future. Will this help me transform my practice? The firms that succeed won't be the ones with the most tech. I'll repeat that. The firms that succeed won't be the ones with the most tech. They'll be the ones who make the tech work for them. And is AI more important than automation, or is automation more important than AI? That's a really good question. And that's something we'll talk about. But this will be out on all the platforms. But I invite you to leave your comments, share your own implementation stories with me, and really partake in this concept that, I'll just read the name on it again. Why we struggle with software implementation, sorry. But it is really, really important. We've all struggled. Well, I don't know if you've all, but I've struggled immensely with this. And I think I found a framework and a structure how to get me out of the struggle and make sure if something gets into my practice, it's in on my terms and it's going to help me achieve what I want to achieve. And that's going to, in turn, help the software provider, the vendor. It's going to help the client and it's going to help my team. Thank you so much, and I will see you on the next episode.